At the turn of the 20th century, America was not merely growing wealthy, it was learning how to display power. This was the Gilded Age, a period when industry reshaped the nation and money concentrated at a speed history had never witnessed before. Railroads bound the continent together, banks multiplied fortunes overnight, and steel, shipping, and finance created a new aristocracy, one not born from bloodlines, but from capital. Along the northeastern coast, Newport, Rhode Island emerged as the chosen stage for this elite class. It was not a city of factories or labor, but a seasonal capital of influence, where the wealthiest families gathered to be seen, judged, and remembered. In Newport, wealth was not hidden, it was performed. To build here was to declare arrival into the highest social order, and the grand houses lining Bellevue Avenue were never meant for comfort alone. They were architectural statements, arguments of status, permanence, and dominance. This environment allowed fortunes to transform into dynasties, where money by itself was no longer enough. What mattered was visibility, ritual, and spectacle. Who hosted the most dazzling evenings? Who commanded the largest rooms? Who could turn a private residence into a public declaration of power? It was within this competitive world that Rosecliff was born, not as a family home, but as a monument to social ambition, designed to gather the elite beneath chandeliers and music, placing its owner at the center of Newport's social universe. If you enjoy exploring the hidden legacy of America's old money dynasties, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Rosecliff rose in a moment when excess was celebrated, silence was rare, and wealth believed itself untouchable. Yet history always outlasts ambition. And when the forces that created such grandeur began to shift, the music that once defined this house did not fade gently. It stopped. And in that silence, Rosecliff began to reveal what old money becomes when the era that sustained it finally comes to an end. Chapter 1. A Palace Made for Applause. Rosecliff Mansion, standing proudly along the famed Bellevue Avenue in Newport, Rhode Island, was never designed as a conventional family home, nor was it intended to offer any genuine privacy or retreat from the scrutiny of society. From its inception at the turn of the 20th century, the mansion existed to be observed, evaluated, and admired, embodying a deliberate and unambiguous statement about wealth, ambition, and social positioning in the unforgiving hierarchy of America's elite. It was commissioned by Teresa Tessie Fair Ulrichs, a woman born into privilege, yet acutely aware that inherited wealth alone could not secure entrance into the tightly controlled circles of social power. Newport, during the height of the Gilded Age, had become more than a seasonal retreat. It had transformed into the preeminent stage for performance among America's richest families, where status was demonstrated through architecture, lavish gatherings, and meticulous attention to appearances, rather than earned through generations of lineage. Wealth in this context was a visible force, and the ability to display it convincingly was as critical as the wealth itself. The city's grand estates served not only as homes, but as instruments of competition, each vying to surpass the others in scale, elegance, and spectacle. And Rosecliff rose from this milieu as one of the most sophisticated and intentional embodiments of ambition. Its design, modeled after the Grand Trianon at Versailles, was chosen with careful consideration, borrowing the visual language of European royalty to translate American fortune into symbols of legitimacy and refinement. While the United States officially rejected aristocratic titles, social recognition remained highly influenced by the aesthetics and rituals of old-world nobility, and Rosecliff leveraged this silent cultural code to assert authority. Its white stone facade, perfectly symmetrical proportions, and commanding position on Bellevue Avenue were intended to communicate power before a single guest crossed its threshold. Inside, the priorities of the mansion were clear. Bedrooms and private quarters were secondary, while ballrooms, salons, reception halls, and corridors dominated the spatial organization. Each room was meticulously planned to encourage movement, interaction, and observation, transforming the house itself into a stage for the display of status. The grand ballroom, among the largest in Newport, was not merely a demonstration of wealth, but a calculated assertion of social dominance, ensuring that no gathering could rival its size or spectacle. Staircases framed entrances, corridors guided circulation, and open sightlines ensured that every guest was constantly aware of both their surroundings and the presence of others, reinforcing the social theater for which the mansion existed. Rosecliff's function was entirely performative. It was brought to life only when filled with guests, music, and conversation, lying dormant in its absence, its elegance meaningless without an audience to appreciate and validate it. Unlike estates developed gradually over generations, steeped in private history and familial continuity, Rosecliff was born from ambition, urgency, and the need for immediate social legitimacy. Newly amassed wealth required public performance, and this mansion provided it in spades, binding its owner to relentless preparation, hosting, and scrutiny. In this environment, social gatherings were obligations, and each event carried the weight of potential judgment, comparison, and reputational consequence. The house rewarded admiration, but demanded submission. The identity of its owner became inseparable from the perception of peers, tied irrevocably to the cycles of spectacle and expectation. Beyond the marble floors and grandiose staircases lay a quiet vulnerability. The mansion's power existed entirely through observation, and without participation, the architectural perfection became hollow. Its scale, beauty, and ceremonial function depended upon the collective attention of society. For the moment the applause waned, the house lost its voice, the chandeliers their purpose, and the halls their authority. Yet Rosecliff's design was an expression of the highest ambition of the Gilded Age, capturing the era's peculiar blend of confidence and insecurity, opulence and fragility. In essence, it was a palace constructed not to endure in silence, but to command attention, to perform wealth continuously, and to convert fortune into visibility, influence, and recognition. Every detail, from its European-inspired facade to the smallest ornamental flourish, was intended to reinforce this purpose, ensuring that no visitor could ever mistake its intent or the status of those who commissioned it. The mansion's existence reflects a paradox central to the lives of America's new elite, that the wealth-granting freedom simultaneously imposed constraints, demanding constant validation, social engagement, and meticulous performance. It was a place where music, movement, and conversation were essential to the house's very identity, and where inactivity or silence threatened to reveal the fragility beneath its grandeur. Rosecliff, in all its elegance and scale, remains one of the clearest testaments to the ambitions, anxieties, and societal pressures of America's Gilded Age, a house created for applause, sustained by it, and always at risk the moment attention shifted elsewhere. Its very conception illustrates the intricate relationship between fortune, performance, and legacy. Wealth alone could not secure lasting influence. It required a stage, an audience, and the relentless assertion of presence. And in this understanding lies the mansion's enduring story, a narrative not of private life, but of visibility, ambition, and the delicate balance between admiration and the silent threat of irrelevance. For Rosecliff, to be seen was to exist, to be acknowledged was to survive socially, and yet, embedded within its perfection, was the inescapable truth: all grandeur relies upon the gaze of others, and without it, even the most magnificent palace becomes a silent witness to a fleeting moment of power that can never be repeated. Chapter 2: Nights that Ruled Newport. In the golden summers of Newport, when the Atlantic breeze mingled with the scent of manicured gardens and salt air, the nights were alive with a singular purpose: to declare, to impress, and to assert the hierarchies of the Gilded Age. Rosecliff Mansion, with its gleaming white facade and grand proportions, became the epicenter of this carefully orchestrated social theater, a place where the elite gathered not for leisure, but to be observed and measured by one another. Each evening, the mansion transformed from stone and marble into a living stage, where music, light, and movement converged to form a spectacle that was both exhilarating and exacting. Orchestras played in the great ballroom, their harmonies amplified by the carefully calculated acoustics of the space, while chandeliers suspended above sparkled like constellations, casting glittering reflections across polished floors and gilded mirrors. The sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and the measured shuffle of dancing feet created a rhythm that defined the mansion's identity as much as its walls or architectural flourishes. Yet beneath this dazzling surface lay an intricate code of conduct, a set of social rules as rigid as the columns supporting the ceilings. Who arrived first, who entered through which doors, how one was introduced, and the manner in which one moved through the rooms all conveyed subtle signals of rank, influence, and alliance. Every guest was under scrutiny, and every gesture, attire, and conversation was a performance designed to assert relevance and secure recognition among peers. It was an environment in which the accumulation of wealth was insufficient without the performance of refinement, where lineage and social acumen were measured against the backdrop of champagne towers, violin melodies, and the swirl of silk gowns across marble floors. Tessie Ulrichs, as the hostess, understood these dynamics implicitly. Her role extended beyond mere hospitality. She orchestrated the nights with the precision of a conductor, ensuring that every movement within the mansion reinforced her family's standing and projected an image of unassailable elegance. Each detail, from the placement of tables to the timing of musical interludes, was designed to maximize visibility and impact, to guarantee that the house and its occupants were the focal point of Newport society. The mansion's guests were not passive participants. They were acutely aware of their roles in this elaborate pageant, understanding that acceptance and admiration were as fleeting as the music that flowed through the rooms. Etiquette, fashion, and subtle social maneuvering were weaponized tools in an invisible competition that demanded perfection, for any misstep could diminish one's perceived authority or influence. Even the decor of the house, the paintings, the ornate moldings, and the crystal chandeliers served to reinforce hierarchy, guiding the eye toward grandeur and positioning certain spaces as markers of prestige within the broader social landscape. In these nights, opulence was more than aesthetic. It was a language, a medium through which power, taste, and exclusivity were communicated with unspoken clarity. Every orchestra, every waltz, and every whispered compliment was an affirmation of dominance, a negotiation of status, and a reinforcement of a social order that defined the era. But amid the dazzling gaiety and cultivated elegance, tension simmered beneath the surface. The very abundance that made these nights spectacular also heightened scrutiny and intensified the stakes of participation. Rival families monitored each other, comparing attire, behavior, and influence. Alliances formed and dissipated within the course of a single evening. Social missteps were remembered, while strategic brilliance in hosting or presentation could elevate a family's prominence for years. The mansion's halls, though filled with music and laughter, were also corridors of evaluation, pressure, and performance. Guests, consciously or not, internalized the rules of observation and expectation, becoming part of a complex choreography that dictated not only movement, but perception, self-presentation, and memory. Rosecliff's nights were therefore both liberating and constraining, liberating in their spectacle, in the opportunity to inhabit a world of beauty and excess, and constraining in the relentless requirement to maintain poise, awareness, and social grace. Every smile, every toast, every graceful pivot on the ballroom floor contributed to an intricate web of influence and judgment, where a single misjudged gesture could subtly shift the balance of status. The knights that ruled Newport were, in this sense, paradoxical. They offered the exhilaration of admiration and recognition while simultaneously exacting the highest cost in diligence, calculation, and subtlety. Music, light, and movement became instruments not merely of celebration, but of social reinforcement, weaving an invisible lattice of expectation and rivalry that bound the mansion's inhabitants to its grandeur. And yet, for all the orchestrated perfection, these nights existed in ephemeral splendor. They were finite, transient, dependent on the presence of the right guests, the alignment of fortune and favor, and the unwavering maintenance of social codes. Rosecliff was animated only by attention, and the absence of it rendered even its most luxurious interiors inert, the chandeliers dim, the polished floors silent, and the memory of laughter faint and fleeting. The mansion's purpose was thus inseparable from its audience. To host without spectators was to fail. To shine without validation was meaningless. And to exist without observation was to confront the fragility that underpinned even the most dazzling displays of wealth. In this environment, the knights that ruled Newport exemplified the pinnacle of Gilded Age ambition, encapsulating the interplay of performance, power, and prestige in a society obsessed with visibility. They reveal a world in which wealth alone was not sufficient, where influence was measured through social dexterity, and where the grandeur of Rosecliff served as both stage and instrument, mediating the aspirations, anxieties, and rivalries of an elite class determined to be seen and remembered. These nights, illuminated by crystal chandeliers, filled with music and conversation, and orchestrated with precision, were not merely entertainment. They were affirmation, negotiation, and declaration. They were the living proof that in Newport, and in the age of America's ascendant fortunes, visibility was power, performance was currency, and the knights that ruled the city defined the very boundaries of influence, legacy, and the fragile yet intoxicating world of old money ambition. Chapter 3. Behind the Velvet Doors. Beyond the glittering facades and the dazzling social spectacles of Newport's summer season lay a world rarely seen by the public eye, a world hidden behind heavy curtains, polished doors, and the velvet draperies that gave this chapter of Rosecliff its name. Here, the mansion revealed a different rhythm of life, one governed not by applause or admiration, but by rules, expectations, and the silent pressures that came with inhabiting a palace designed entirely for observation. While the great ballrooms and salons had been engineered to broadcast wealth and command attention, the private quarters, service wings, and behind-the-scenes corridors told a story of meticulous control and deliberate separation. The mansion, so alive when guests were present, became at other times a space of strict order, with domestic staff moving in almost imperceptible patterns to maintain the flawless impression of ease that defined Newport society. In these corridors, the veneer of casual luxury concealed a relentless regimen, silver polished until it gleamed, marble floors scrubbed to an impossible shine, chandeliers cleaned and inspected, as if each crystal were a measure of social worth. The very walls of Rosecliff seemed to impose discipline upon those who resided within them, a constant reminder that the mansion's grandeur demanded not only admiration, but submission to its logic. For Tessie Ulrichs and her family, life within Rosecliff was at once indulgent and confining, offering the privileges of extreme wealth while exacting a toll in vigilance, propriety, and performance. Bedrooms, dining rooms, and private salons, though lavishly decorated, were spaces where every detail contributed to the maintenance of social standing, where even personal habits and routines were subtly shaped to conform to the expectations of society. The mansion's very design reinforced this duality. Wide hallways and open sightlines allowed servants to monitor movements. High windows and strategically placed mirrors ensured that reflections of order were always visible. The division of space dictated who could access which areas, establishing invisible hierarchies even within the household itself. Within these velvet-draped confines, appearances mattered more than comfort, and control was inseparable from luxury. Staff, though essential, were kept in the shadows, their presence carefully choreographed so that the mansion itself appeared effortless, as if beauty and refinement were spontaneous rather than maintained through rigorous labor. Guests, meanwhile, often never saw this side of Rosecliff, unaware that the perfect presentation of opulence was sustained through an intricate network of rules, schedules, and oversight. Yet even for those who dwelled within, the mansion's splendor could feel isolating. Its scale and design imposed a sense of separation from the outside world, both physically and psychologically. The vast rooms, though filled with art and decoration, amplified solitude in moments when the house was not hosting society's elite, and the very rituals that had secured prominence also contributed to a sense of confinement. In a house built to be observed, privacy was scarce, and even the most personal moments were susceptible to scrutiny, whether real or imagined. This tension extended to every facet of life. The arrangement of furniture dictated social interactions, the placement of windows and doors controlled sightlines, and the architecture itself seemed to insist on constant awareness of how one was perceived. Wealth, in Rosecliff, was inseparable from performance, and this performance extended beyond the ballroom into every corner of domestic life. Servants, family members, and occasional visitors all navigated a complex web of expectations, etiquette, and hierarchy, where a single misstep could undermine the carefully cultivated illusion of perfection. It was within this environment that the mansion revealed its most subtle power, the ability to shape behavior, dictate rhythm, and reinforce social order even when the eyes of society were not present. Yet the same design that produced elegance also nurtured tension. Silence became oppressive. The absence of music or conversation could transform beauty into emptiness, luxury into reminder of isolation. The mansion's walls, so often witnesses to laughter and applause, were also witnesses to the quiet anxieties and pressures of those who inhabited them, recording the invisible negotiations, compromises, and performances required to maintain status within Newport society. Rooms filled with portraits, gilded furniture, and imported decorations served as both comfort and cage, as symbols of prestige and markers of expectation. Each detail, from the placement of an armchair to the alignment of silverware, reinforced the principles of control, visibility, and hierarchy. Within Rosecliff's hidden corners, the mansion became a microcosm of Gilded Age society itself, rigidly ordered, intensely hierarchical, obsessed with appearance, and perpetually conscious of power and influence. Here, the very architecture enforced obedience, demanded vigilance, and reminded residents that the world beyond the doors existed to judge, not to shelter. And yet, despite the constraints, life behind the velvet doors was also a testament to ingenuity, resilience, and adaptation. Inhabitants and staff alike learned to navigate its rigidities, to perform not only for the occasional guests, but for the unceasing expectations of the house itself. In doing so, they revealed a deeper truth about wealth and social ambition, that the grandeur of Rosecliff, like the Gilded Age it epitomized, depended equally on human effort, discipline, and the willingness to inhabit a world of simultaneous luxury and surveillance. The mansion, in its private corridors, bedrooms, and hidden salons, was a place of paradox, intensely beautiful yet claustrophobic, richly adorned yet demanding, alive with possibility yet bound by the invisible chains of social expectation. Behind the velvet doors, opulence and control intertwined inseparably, shaping the lives, decisions, and identities of all who entered, revealing that the true power of Rosecliff lay not only in its outward magnificence, but in its ability to orchestrate, regulate, and define life itself within the boundaries it established. The mansion, in all its hidden complexity, thus stands as a symbol of the duality of old money ambition, offering privilege and grandeur while imposing unrelenting discipline and invisible expectation, a place where beauty and anxiety coexist, and where every whispered conversation, polished surface, and measured gesture contributes to the relentless rhythm of Gilded Age life. Chapter 4. When the music stopped, the summer nights of Newport, once alive with the rhythms of orchestras, laughter, and the glitter of candlelight reflecting across polished marble floors, eventually fell silent, marking the end of an era in which wealth and performance had defined social life with unyielding precision. Rosecliff Mansion, which had once pulsed with energy and ambition, suddenly became a monument to absence, a structure that no longer required music to assert its authority, yet lost much of the vitality that had justified its existence. The world that had sustained its grandeur, the carefully choreographed pageantry of the Gilded Age, the seasonal migration of America's wealthiest families, the rituals of observation, validation, and competition, began to shift irrevocably. Industrial fortunes, once concentrated and stable, faced new economic pressures, while the social codes of Newport's elite evolved with the changing century, eroding the certainty of inclusion that had underwritten the house's prominence. What had been a predictable cycle of appearances and applause transformed into uncertainty, and the mansion, designed for spectacle and social affirmation, became a silent witness to the fragility of the world it had once amplified. The grand ballrooms, expansive salons, and polished staircases that had been stages for extraordinary performances now echoed with absence. Each crystal chandelier, once reflecting the glittering excitement of elegantly dressed guests, hung over empty floors. Each imported painting, gilded sculpture, and imported furnishing now served as markers of memory rather than tools of influence. The staff, once orchestrating the flawless execution of lavish events, adjusted to the absence of the elite gatherings, maintaining the physical perfection of the mansion while the social life that gave it meaning dissolved. Tessie Ulrichs and her contemporaries, whose social acumen had ensured prominence and participation, confronted a new reality. Visibility no longer guaranteed recognition, and wealth alone no longer secured influence. The intricate choreography that had dictated arrivals, introductions, and departures, the precise timing of music, lighting, and dance, was replaced by emptiness, and the social pressures that had driven excellence now became reminders of obsolescence. In this quiet, the mansion revealed its dual nature. Beauty persisted, but vitality diminished. Architecture retained its authority, but purpose had shifted. Rosecliff was still imposing, elegant, and aesthetically perfect. Yet the absence of music, conversation, and observation emphasized the mansion's dependency on the attention it once commanded. Silence, in this context, was not merely the absence of sound. It was the manifestation of social decline, the end of performative power, and the exposure of the delicate scaffolding that had sustained the Gilded Age's elite. The loss of seasonal gatherings, combined with broader economic and cultural shifts, transformed the mansion from a living stage into a repository of history and memory, where the grandeur of past performances contrasted sharply with the inactivity of the present. It became evident that Rosecliff, like the families it had elevated, was vulnerable to forces beyond its walls. Changes in taste, the redistribution of wealth, and the natural evolution of societal norms all undermined the mansion's function as a beacon of influence. The lessons of its stillness were unmistakable. Wealth and architecture, no matter how extraordinary, require context, participation, and recognition to sustain their power. In its silence, the mansion exposed the fragile foundations of status, demonstrating that visibility is transient, influence conditional, and the most impressive stage is dependent on an audience willing to engage. Moreover, this quiet revealed the human costs of performance, the unrelenting pressure, the constant vigilance, the sacrifices made to maintain appearances, all of which were rendered invisible in the absence of observers. The people who had inhabited Rosecliff, both family and staff, had existed within a system that demanded perfection. And with the end of music and applause, the psychological and social weight of those demands became starkly apparent. Rooms designed for elegance and display became markers of isolation. Corridors once filled with movement now accentuating emptiness, and private quarters reflected the duality of luxury and confinement. In a sense, the mansion's silence was a mirror of the broader decline of the Gilded Age elite, whose fortunes, influence, and rituals had been sustained by social consensus and theatrical performance. The house endured, but the society that had animated it began to vanish. Rosecliff remained an architectural masterpiece, a testament to ambition and taste, yet it now carried the echo of absence, a reminder that no material or design could permanently secure social dominance. The stopping of the music was more than literal, it was symbolic, marking the end of an era in which wealth, etiquette, and spectacle intertwined seamlessly to assert power. As Newport's streets emptied and the seasonal migration of elites diminished, the mansion's halls absorbed the quiet, reflecting not only physical beauty, but the impermanence of human endeavor. Every chandelier, polished floor, and gilded frame now bore witness to the passing of time, demonstrating that even the most meticulous planning, the most exquisite design, and the most disciplined performance could not forestall the inevitability of change. In its silence, Rosecliff offered a profound commentary on ambition, society, and the transient nature of influence. Power and recognition are dependent. Attention is finite. And the structures we build to assert permanence often reveal their vulnerability in the absence of acknowledgement. The mansion's stillness spoke of the fragility of prestige, the limits of wealth, and the ultimate reality that all grandeur, no matter how carefully orchestrated, relies upon the perception of others. And so, the music that had defined the rhythm of Newport faded, leaving Rosecliff to confront a new existence. Majestic yet still, grand yet introspective, elegant yet undeniably marked by the cessation of the forces that had once given it life and meaning. Chapter 5. A House Without a Dynasty. As the decades passed, Rosecliff Mansion, once the jewel of Newport's elite and the stage upon which the Gilded Age had performed its most extravagant rituals, began to experience a profound transformation. From a center of social gravity to a house without a dynasty, a monument to memory rather than influence. The grand facades, which had once announced power and wealth to the world, now loomed with an air of quiet melancholy, their polished surfaces reflecting a landscape that had shifted irreversibly. Families who had once dominated the social calendars no longer gathered within its walls. The orchestras had ceased to play, the laughter had grown faint, and the meticulously choreographed dances and banquets that had defined generations had been replaced by silence, the mansion itself bearing witness to the absence of the human energy that had justified its existence. The decline was neither sudden nor accidental. It was the natural consequence of time, social change, and the erosion of concentrated wealth. Economic forces, including fluctuations in industrial fortunes, shifts in societal values, and the gradual democratization of privilege, undermined the mechanisms that had sustained Newport's summer season. Rosecliff, designed to convert wealth into visibility and influence, found itself increasingly irrelevant in a world where attention could no longer be commanded through opulence alone. The very architecture that had once projected dominance now emphasized isolation. Vast rooms amplified echoes rather than applause. Empty staircases highlighted solitude rather than arrival. And gilded mirrors reflected only the emptiness of space rather than the vibrancy of social interaction. Behind every polished surface and within every grand salon, lay the quiet testimony of absence, a reminder that the most meticulously constructed environments are only as powerful as the people who animate them. Staff, who had once been the invisible machinery ensuring perfection during events, now maintained the mansion out of obligation, their labor serving memory rather than purpose. Tessie Ulrich's descendants and those of her peers, either dispersed, integrated into other social spheres, or diminished in influence, leaving Rosecliff to endure as a physical artifact unmoored from the social hierarchies that had once given it life. In its emptiness, the mansion's dual nature was starkly apparent. It remained magnificent, exquisite in design, and breathtaking in scale, yet it no longer functioned as a medium of power, recognition, or relevance. The very elements that had facilitated performance, grand ballrooms, sweeping staircases, decorative flourishes, and high ceilings, now conveyed a sense of futility, illustrating that architecture alone cannot sustain authority without context or audience. What had once been a house that orchestrated social dominance had become a house that recorded history, a silent ledger of ambition, rivalry, and ephemeral glory. Its walls contained the echo of footsteps, laughter, and whispered strategies, each sound a memory rather than a present event, a trace of human ambition now frozen in time. The mansion's decline also revealed the fragility of legacy itself. Wealth, influence, and status, though potent in the moment, were transient, contingent upon continued engagement, visibility, and social validation. Rosecliff stood as a reminder that dynasties are not built on stone alone, that the accumulation of material power is insufficient without the social infrastructure to support it, and that even the most elegant designs, meticulously planned and executed, cannot preserve relevance indefinitely. The mansion's empty corridors, silent salons, and dormant ballrooms embodied both the brilliance and the vulnerability of the Gilded Age elite, emphasizing the paradox of extreme wealth. It offers privilege and opportunity while demanding constant performance and vigilance, and in the absence of these, even the most formidable structures can become monuments to irrelevance. Beyond the physical decline, there was also a psychological and cultural impact. The emptiness of Rosecliff invited reflection upon the fleeting nature of influence, the impermanence of recognition, and the limits of human endeavor when invested solely in the external demonstration of power. Each room, carefully curated with imported furnishings, gilded moldings, and artful decorations, spoke to a past where precision, taste, and meticulous attention had conferred status. And yet now these same elements reflected the futility of their existence when divorced from social context. The mansion's aesthetic perfection became simultaneously its indictment, a mirror showing the distance between aspiration and reality, between the desire for permanence and the inevitability of change. In this state, Rosecliff was more than a house. It was a cautionary emblem, illustrating the limitations of architecture and wealth in sustaining human ambition across generations. It reminded all who entered, or even observed from afar, that dynasties are fragile, that influence is conditional, and that the mechanisms of power, ceremony, visibility, and performance are temporal, reliant on continual affirmation by peers and society at large. While the mansion could not cease to exist, its relevance had been rendered impermanent, a lesson etched into every polished floor, every echoing corridor, and every silent ballroom. Rosecliff, magnificent yet uninhabited by the forces that once validated it, became a repository of memory, a testament to the era that had elevated it, and a warning of the impermanence of social dominance. Its beauty remained undeniable, but its purpose had shifted irrevocably. From a stage upon which power was exercised to a monument preserving its memory. And in this preservation, the mansion spoke with clarity and inevitability, demonstrating that while wealth and design can command admiration in the present, the continuation of a dynasty requires more than mere structure. It requires participation, engagement, and the ever-renewed attention of those who confer meaning. Rosecliff, in its quiet grandeur, thus embodies both the triumphs and the vulnerabilities of the Gilded Age, illustrating that the most brilliant houses, like the most powerful families, can endure physically, yet lose the very essence that once made them vital, becoming in time a house without a dynasty. Magnificent in appearance, yet hollow in authority, echoing endlessly with the music that no longer plays and the applause that has long since faded into history. Rosecliff Mansion, in its silent grandeur, stands as a testament to ambition, wealth, and the fleeting nature of human influence. The music has long since stopped, the ballrooms lie empty, and the laughter that once defined the summer nights of Newport is now only a memory whispered through the halls. What remains is the structure itself, a magnificent, imposing shell that reflects both triumph and fragility, elegance and emptiness. In its walls, one can trace the stories of those who sought visibility, power, and recognition. Each corridor a reminder that wealth alone cannot preserve legacy, and that dynasties, no matter how grand, are vulnerable to the relentless passage of time. Rosecliff's beauty endures, yet it is inseparable from the silence that follows the applause, illustrating that the most brilliant displays of grandeur are temporary, dependent on attention, and ultimately impermanent. The mansion teaches a quiet but unforgiving lesson. Ambition demands constant validation, influence is conditional, and the stage upon which power is performed can vanish as swiftly as the music that once filled it. As we leave these halls, we are reminded that history favors neither wealth nor walls alone, but the continuous engagement, effort, and social connection that sustain relevance across generations. Rosecliff, magnificent yet solitary, offers both inspiration and warning. The pursuit of greatness is exhilarating, but it is always shadowed by impermanence. Its story lingers not only in marble and crystal, but in the echoes of ambition, that even when unrealized or forgotten, continue to haunt those who walk in its legacy. And so the mansion stands, beautiful, silent, and unyielding, an eternal monument to the delicate balance between power, recognition, and the inexorable passage of time. If this journey through Newport's Gilded Age, through the lights and shadows of Rosecliff, has captivated you, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel so that more stories of ambition, wealth, and the haunting echoes of history can reach you in full, unbroken, and unforgettable form.